They were just like, oh, you just want husbands to beat their wives again. And so I had to make a rebuttal video and state that that was not what I was trying to push towards the world.
Welcome to Erupt, your home for conversations that matter. We are currently living in a time where debate is a hard word. We don't like to use that word anymore because it insinuates that we're going to fight with each other. Here in Erupt, that's not what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to bring people together who may have differing opinions in hopes that they not only have conversations together, but maybe change each other's minds, maybe see things from a different perspective. I want to encourage you as we start to subscribe to our channel. You're going to be getting a lot of content here from us on Erupt, and we would love to see you continue to support us and our work of bringing people together to have these conversations. My name is ARYA DAVACHI. I'm coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. I am sitting across from Kaylee Campbell and Roy Duran Jr. We are here today to talk about masculinity. What a loaded word that has become. Masculinity. Does masculinity have a bad reputation? When did that happen? Is masculinity suddenly now sort of synonymous with the patriarchy, whatever the patriarchy is? When did masculinity become evil? Is it time to reconsider it? If so, how do we do that without upsetting the feminists? And how do we do that without sort of undermining feminism in general? Big topics, huge questions. I'm so excited to be here with Kaylee and with Roy. I'm going to introduce each of them to you right now. Kaylee Campbell is coming to me live from Lubbock, Texas. Kaylee is a political influencer, social media reporter. You may have seen her on TikTok. She's got 45,000 TikTok followers. You may have seen her on Instagram. She posts quite a bit. Kaylee, welcome to Erupt. So happy to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm going to turn to Roy. Roy is coming to us from Santa Barbara, California. Roy is a coach and local president of Success Stories in Santa Barbara. It's an organization that works inside of the incarcerated system. Roy is actually previously incarcerated and is now a psychology student and key figure in the CNN documentary about Success Stories, The Feminist on Cell Block Y. Roy, welcome to Erupt. So happy to have you as well.
I'm happy to be here, humbled by the experience. Thank you, Erupt. Thank you, Kaylee, for joining us. I'm looking forward to this dialogue rather than debate.
Yes, dialogue rather than debate. At this time, I want to encourage everyone to strap in because I'm about to drop some maybe controversial statistics here. In 2019, citing more than 40 years of research, the American Psychological Association warned against the idea of, quote, masculinity ideology, which it defined as a particular constellation of standards that have helped sway over large segments of the population, including anti-femininity, achievement, eschewal of the appearance of weakness, and adventure, risk, and violence. Wow, we're going to take that and I know Kaylee, I can already tell Kaylee's ready to talk about it. She made a very influential TikTok about this. In their continual study of masculinity, the American Psychological Association also said men in the United States commit an estimated 90% more homicides than women and are much more likely to be arrested for domestic violence. Roy, I'm actually going to come to you first because I want to hear your reaction to the American Psychological Association's warning against the idea of masculinity ideology. Roy, what is your immediate sort of response to their diagnosis?
What took so long? When I think about patriarchy, the culture that teaches that dominance is a way to validate worth. It's a natural consequence that harm is a result of that ideology. And I think that we've known this as a society, and I say we in a loose term, generally, we know that anything that's based on one person dominating another person, or a group of people dominating another group of people, or a nation dominating another nation is something that is repressive to our autonomy as individuals and our autonomy as communities. And a big part of what masculinity that we define as toxic is what we define as toxic masculinity. And that's when people validate their worth through their dominance, so their ability to dominate other human beings, primarily through our financial status, through our physical abilities, including violence, but not limited to, and through objectifying and manipulating women. Another byproduct of toxic masculinity that I can relate to being indoctrinated with at a very young age, virtually since my first memory was that I am not supposed to be emotional as a man. And that is so repressive. That taught me to reject a part of myself. So I end up with this internal conflict, this internal war, masking who I truly am to fit into this cookie cutter culture that teaches me what and who I'm supposed to be as an individual. So what we advocate for is the feminist perspective, and simply put, all that means is equality. And I think that feminism oftentimes gets misinterpreted or misconstrued, and it turns into it's all about advocating against men, advocating against masculinity, and that's not the case. All we're saying is that we should live in a world where everybody is equal and everybody has the opportunity to be their unique selves and to reach their unique potential. I want to live in a world where my baby girls have the opportunity just as much as a male has the opportunity to become president of the United States, not because she's a woman, but because she has the abilities and the capabilities and the potential to lead our nation.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for that. Kaylee, I'm going to come to you. For those who may not have seen the video that Kaylee posted in regards to the APA's deeming of the masculine ideology, Kaylee, you were very intense and verbose around your thoughts on the response by the APA. Can you talk to me a bit about that initial response that you had, and almost more importantly, the response that then you received from the public for your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did make that video and it did get pretty heated. I was reading the article and it was talking about toxic masculinity. And in my generation specifically, I've noticed within the feminism movement that the goal maybe isn't to overpower men, but that's definitely the direction they like to take it, especially on social media. I know that many different generations have gone through the different waves of feminism. And right now, I think we're entering the third or fourth. And I think that toxic masculinity as a whole, when I was talking about it in the video, was taken completely out of context, because specifically I said men from the 50s and 60s, and people took that and they completely ran with it and they took it all out of context, because I wasn't implying anything about men beating women at all. But that was probably 30,000 of the comments that were on that video. They were just like, oh, you just want husbands to beat their wives again. And so I had to make a rebuttal video and state that that was not what I was trying to push towards the world.
One thing that you did mention in that video that I was intrigued by, Kaylee, was the idea of the beta male. I feel like I know who alpha males are. I think historically, I can place that person in my brain. Can you talk to me about beta males and your aversion to beta males?
Yeah. So, I've always grown up with strong men who are independent, hold a lot of assertiveness and a lot of leadership in the household. And with beta males, what we see, again, in my generation, is, I don't think there's anything wrong with guys being sensitive, but when you start kind of leaning towards a more feminine aspect and wanting to become more feminine, then that draws a lot of women away. And with the beta males in our society, I think that they're just trying to become over feminine. And the women that I know don't want that. They want a man who's assertive, not aggressive, not dominating in a negative way, but just very strong and assertive and protective over their families.
So I just want to make sure before I pass over to Roy for his response, you have sort of labeled beta males as those who might be a bit more feminine, a bit less not aggressive is not the right word, but a bit more subdued, maybe more of a responsive sort of person than an action-oriented person, right, Kaylee?
More passive. An example would be if the feminists and the women are very aggressive, they're I hate men, all men are trash, all of that. Men who don't stand up for themselves, even though they have the full capabilities of doing that, it just comes off as very passive and not assertive.
Sure. Roy, I want to come to you. I want to come to you because on very specific context, because the work that you do, Roy, is with incarcerated men, and you were formerly incarcerated yourself. And, you know, I'm unafraid to say that in my mind, it's a very specific world of being incarcerated. It's a very intense, very masculine space, frankly, in my mind. That might be due to media portrayals of the incarcerated. But I want to hear from you on this, Roy. I want to hear your thoughts on the concerns that Kaylee has voiced around the beta males and sort of the potential influx of how feminism could prove to be negative for men and men who are maybe becoming more submissive.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. We live in a world where we're constantly being indoctrinated and bombarded with who and what we're supposed to be, from, you know, from our parents to our churches, to our communities, to our schools, to our media, to our social media, to all these different agencies of socialization. And I hear Kaylee, what she says are completely valid points. Those are things that I've considered, like you were discussing. I grew up in a hyper toxic masculine environment, you know, where it's dog eat dog, it's survival of the fittest. Mm-hmm. And what I learned in there was that defending myself didn't take aggression, as Kaylee mentioned. I didn't need to be aggressive. I needed to be assertive. And that's not because I'm a man. That's because I'm responsible for my autonomy as a human being. And we talk about what does it take to become a psychologically healthy individual. And assertiveness is one of the key components, because assertiveness communicates that my needs are important and your needs are important. I care about myself, I care about you, and I care about this relationship. So assertive communication and assertive behavior is not just something that is limited to males and masculinity. In fact, I respect people that assert themselves in certain ways. And it's not just men, it's women as well. Those are healthy characteristics for a psychologically healthy individual. But we do live in a society where people want to fit in. Like, it's not just society. I think it's a basic human need to be able to conform to the group. I think we've evolved to conform to the group for protection. And even at a deeper sense, I think that we are all one. I mean, but that's just my belief. I think that is our purpose, and that is our duty as individuals, to be able to support and serve the whole. So what I come to is what's healthy for the whole. You know, there was a movie that I watched once, and there was a series of one line, either or, yes or no questions being posed to a girl that was interviewing for our company. And one of the questions were, what's best for the individual or what's best for the community? And she broke the norm of answering either or, yes or no. And what she said was, it should be the same. And so what we advocate as feminists, what we advocate as abolitionists, is the perspective that we can come to as a collective and ask each other and ask ourselves, what's best for me as an individual? What's best for us as a community? And to find that common ground, because it should be the same.
Certainly. Kaylee, I want to ask you a question that's been floating in my mind as we've been preparing for this conversation, you know, and Roy has spoken really passionately about abolitionism and feminism. Kaylee, do you, in your mind, and this isn't a trick question in any way, just genuinely curious, do you think that feminism and masculinity are opposites or at even odds with each other?
I would say that they're similar in certain ways, but at the same time, like feminism, it's just what it used to be, and like the original goal and everything that it was in the first wave, and then what it's completely turned into now when we enter the third and fourth wave of it has just completely gone off track. And I think that also toxic masculinity and traditional masculinity get mixed up a lot of the time as well.
Can you elaborate on that for me, just the difference between those two things in your mind?
Yeah, so traditional masculinity, like what I said earlier, is, you know, the man being the head of the household, wanting to have the job while the wife stays at home. And I'm not against women having jobs. I'm not against women going out and being who they should be. But typical in your traditional American family, you have the man making the money, the wife staying at home, taking care of the kids, using her motherly instincts as she should. And toxic masculinity has kind of been drawn into the feminism movement nowadays of all men are evil, all men need to just disappear, men are terrible, and women in the feminist movement are like trying to overcompensate for things that they already have. Like, I want to know in nowadays what women don't have that men do, and like what we're missing. Because as a woman myself, I can't think of something that I don't have or can't do that a man can, if that makes sense.
Sure. Roy, I want to ask you your opinion on some of what Kaylee just said, specifically about, feminism more or less continually saying that all men are toxic, or that toxic masculinity is sort of the end all be all of where society stands. What are your thoughts on what Kaylee's been sharing with us, Roy?
So I want to say that what she stated is true about certain people's views. First of all, like, what she's saying is valid. There are certain people that I have heard that hold those views.
Just to be clear, those people you're talking about would label themselves as feminists.
Yeah, some people label themselves as feminists, but don't line up with what we believe as feminists. Just because a person identifies in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that they're in line with, the movement. They're in line with the ideology of equality, the ideology of empathy, the ideology of love. So what I want to say is something that she had mentioned about traditional masculinity that I think that can be harmful, potentially harmful. So, statistics, we know about statistics, 50% of marriages end in divorce. I grew up in a family with my father. He was incarcerated. So my mom, she wore both hats. She was my mother and my father in terms of responsibilities. So I say that to say that, there's an ideology that comes largely from Christian doctrine that teaches that man is head of the house. Now, when we're conditioned to believe this from the very beginning of our lives, sometimes we don't think outside of that perspective that we've been offered. Now, what I want to offer is that the head of the house can be both. The head of the house probably should be who's most equipped, who's best qualified. Now, that's just the perspective that I offer. And I was talking to Kaylee before we came on about perspective taking. There's a story about 5 or some blind men touching an elephant. They were all touching the same exact elephant. And there was an observer asking them to describe what they were experiencing. And each and every one of them described something different. And then they began to debate furiously, opposing one another. And they didn't even realize that they were touching the same elephant. Now, I think that perspective taking is super important because we just expand our psychological horizons by being able to see things from multiple perspectives. Rather than viewing things as right or wrong, rather than viewing things as good or bad, let's view things in the best way that we can to see what's healthy, what's productive, what's unhealthy, and what's unproductive.
Kaylee, your response to Roy's comments?
Yeah, I definitely see where he's coming from. And I think that makes total sense that, we should see who's best qualified to run the household. I know that there are many different types of family dynamics out there. I want to touch on the Bible verse where it talks about, wives submit to your husbands. The Bible verse after that is the one that not a lot of people talk about because it goes into detail about how that man should be ready to give his life up for his wife. And I think that reflects, like the equality that a lot of us strive for, even though we may explain it in different ways. Like, yes, wives submit to your husbands, but that doesn't mean take the abuse. That doesn't mean, take a beating. I don't think, like, when I think of a man beating his wife, the first thing that doesn't come to my mind, or the first thing that, it doesn't come to my mind is masculinity. Like, you're not masculine in my eyes if you beat up your wife or anybody at all, actually.
Sure. I'm glad to hear that because I would identify as a masculine person, and I'm glad that those two things don't correlate for you. I want to ask you, Kaylee, this is part of the reason why we're here at Erupt. This is what Erupt is about, is bringing people together who potentially have very different viewpoints and bringing them into conversation. And I've loved sort of hearing you both bring your opinions to the table here. And, I can't ignore the realities of what it means to live in America right now and sort of the world that we live in, as you've also experienced, Kaylee, from social media and from the response you got to your video. We live in a time in which those who have opposing views are often met with hostility and are encouraged, frankly, to utilize hostility and to utilize hate and aggressive nature to address one another. And I wanted your opinion on this is, we've had a pretty civil conversation here for the last 20 minutes or so. Talk to me about how we can continue to have these sorts of conversations in the real world and what your hopes are as someone who has received a lot of hate through the internet.
Yeah. I've definitely gotten a lot of DMs, death threats, people DMing me saying that they want to beat me up. And it's just like, I think in order to have these civil conversations, like getting into this industry, I've had more civil conversations with people who typically lean left, like behind closed doors, and not that much productivity when it comes to being in front of the camera. And so I really, really like what y'all are doing, because I feel like it's very important for both sides to understand that it's okay to have very civil conversations. You don't see that a lot on social media. We went to an event at a college down here, and a lot of it was just very, very much hostility happening. But I had a decent conversation with one of the girls who was actually asking us a bunch of questions, but that wasn't caught on camera. So I think it's very important for news outlets and media companies to bring attention to the fact that you can disagree, but you can still have a very civil conversation with somebody and understand and respect their perspectives.
I want to take, Kaylee, something that Roy said and sort of posit it to you and see what your response would be. Roy talked about sort of the division in terms of those who identify as feminists. He talked about, those who say things that he doesn't agree with. And, I think there's a lot of people who think that way about the left in general, if you will. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? And what would you say to Roy in terms of sort of the potential fractures in feminism and being on the left?
I would say that I don't like to group everybody in the left together. There's liberalism, there's Democrats, there's the left. It's all over the place. And I know it's a spectrum. And so I don't go into a conversation automatically assuming they're the hardcore anti everything leftist. But I think, that's why it's important to talk to people, because you don't know what they actually stand for until you hear their opinions and you hear them go into detail about it. And I think that a lot, I keep bringing up my generation just because I've seen it so much, because we're so involved in social media. Everybody's everywhere constantly. A lot of the younger people in my generation aren't very educated on the topics. And that's why I respect the older generations more, because they happen to do their research more often and they know what they're talking about. A lot of the people that I've actually gotten in like hostile arguments with they don't even know what they're talking about. But I can definitely tell that Roy knows exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah. So Roy, I want to come to you, man. I want to talk to you about, your work as a coach and as an educator really asks you to help people find themselves and sort of recenter themselves in not only just a feminist space, but as a human. Can you talk to me about the process of going around and sort of having to re-educate people and sort of change their minds about things? And because I think that's something that a lot of us would like to see more of in the world. And I think a lot of people are scared to do that work. Is there anything that you can shed some light on when it comes to educating and sort of allowing for discourse on pretty intense ideas?
So first of all, I want to say something to Kaylee. Kaylee, I'm sorry that you experienced that harassment and that violence for just speaking your mind. I do believe that that's important for us to be able to advocate for what we believe in as people and be able to be safe while doing so. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry that you experienced that.
Thank you.
Now, yeah. And now to what you were talking about. So what we do in success stories is it can be captured in this quote: "We do not seek to eliminate darkness. We simply add light." Mm-hmm. So the light is we help the people that go through our program to identify who is most important in their life. What is most important to you in your life? In our earlier days, we used to have people that were in our program write their own obituary. And in the process of writing your obituary, you would reflect back on how you have been living your life up until that moment. And there was some cognitive dissonance that would occur when people were writing that obituary, when they realized that they weren't living their lives congruently with their values that they held in their mind. You know, that saying that says action speaks louder than words. We never really say that in the group, but we help people to become aware of those incongruencies in their life. So then we ask them, like, well, what is your definition of success? And we help them to define success for themselves. And then we help them to map out some goals, short-term, long-term goals, to live their lives as congruently as possible with how they define success. And ultimately, we find that most people define success based on the relationships that they have with the people that they love. And sadly, sometimes we don't think about that until we lose somebody that we love. And I think death is one of the most profound teachers because it teaches us how to live. It teaches us to value the people that we have while we have them. Because although we do have faith, a lot of us, I have faith in something after this. I don't know that I have something after this. I believe and hope that I do. But what I do know I have right now is this moment. So I appreciate y'all in this present moment. Even though we're just meeting, I love you. And I'm here to support you. I want the best for you. And that's what we do as coaches and success stories. We stand beside people. We're not in front of people. We're right beside you. And we're going to help you identify the life that you want in life and help you map out a realistic plan to achieve that. So one of the things that we identify as harmful is this toxic masculine ideology. It's a cookie cutter ideology that teaches you you're supposed to be the way society wants you to be. And now that doesn't make room for people to be their unique individual selves. And we teach people to respect other people's autonomy. We hold conversations that invite people into empathy, viewing things from a perspective of not being in a place of privilege. You know, as a man, I'm in a position of privilege just for simply being male. Now, that is something that we invite people to consider, not only how they use that privilege, but how people that don't have that privilege feel, and how some people are oppressed and how some people are marginalized. You know, like even today, like I was talking about earlier, we still haven't had a woman president, not because women aren't qualified, but because they're women. And that's sad, because just think about the potential that we would have in this world if we harnessed their creativity, if we harnessed and nurtured their unique individuality, and they were able to explore and live in a world where they could reach their full potential as people.
I want to jump in for a second, Roy, only because I want Kaylee's opinion on. I firstly want to thank you for the work that you do and sharing yourself with us. Both of you, I'm truly sitting here in awe. But Kaylee, I want your opinion on what Roy just said about women not being president, because I think it was an interesting point, and I kind of saw your head tilt to the side, and I want your perspective on that. Roy said, you know, women haven't become president not because of their lack of skills, but because they're women. Kaylee, your response.
So I think that, you know, as America as a whole, like personally, as a woman, I don't care if we haven't had a woman president, just because I typically lean to the side of believing in gender roles. And like, you know, there are things that women are good at, then sometimes they're better at it than men. And then there's things that men are good at, and sometimes they're better at it than women. And I think that's okay. I feel like we're constantly in a fight of like, oh, everybody needs to be good at like everything, like under the same umbrella, when there are a lot of like psychological and biological attributes towards men and women that they just happen to excel in. It doesn't mean that they're like lesser of a person if they're not good at something. It just means that as men and as women, we have different like standards and like things that we're good at. And I think that we should embrace that instead of trying to constantly battle back and forth and be like, all right, everybody needs to just do everything good all at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Roy, do you have any response to that? If not, I've got a question for you.
I do. And I want to talk a little bit about unrealistic expectations. And what Kaylee's saying is right. You know, we live in a culture that teaches if you're not perfect, you're not good enough. And that's harmful to our self-worth. That's harmful to our self-concept. And that's harmful to our psychological health. So I'm in agreement with a lot of what she said about these unrealistic expectations that we have on ourselves and that society has on each other. But I'm interested in the question that you wanted to pose.
Well, yeah, I mean, the question I wanted to pose to you is, you know, I'm listening to Kaylee and, you know, I'm thinking about the feminists that I know and those on the left that I know who would pounce on Kaylee quickly and would make sure that she got a piece of their mind. And we talked a bit earlier, Roy, about sort of the division within the feminist movement. There are extreme feminists, if you will. There are those who would never maybe engage in a conversation with Kaylee. And then there's those like yourself and others who would love to talk to Kaylee and would love to be involved in this conversation. And I think right now, zooming out a bit, looking at the political spectrum, the left feels incredibly divided. Liberalism feels divided. Feminism, I would put in a liberal bubble, if you will. I want your thoughts on sort of the division that lives on your side of the playing field and how you think we can sort of move to create unity amongst those who maybe agree 95% of the way, but that last 5 don't.
I would say leading with empathy, compassion, and perspective. When we lead with empathy, we take the time to place ourselves in another person's psychological position. Imagine what's going on in their mind. Imagine what the experiences they've had throughout their lives. Imagine the passion that they feel in their heart, even the physiological sensations when a conversation is taking place, what they feel in their body. And then when we can step into another person's experience in this way, we can actually have compassion in the process of having dialogue. And one of the things that I'm tempted by oftentimes is to get in something called the writing reflex, to get into this response where I'm telling you what's right and I'm telling you what's wrong. And that's coming from a position of arrogance, and my arrogance is based on my ignorance. So whenever I can empty myself and humble myself to the fact, to the truth, and there's a saying, the truth shall set you free. The truth is, I don't know it all. The truth is, I still have so much to learn. So whenever I come into this conversation with the spirit of curiosity, I could actually learn, grow, and evolve as a human being. Now, one of the things that I'm passionate about, besides psychology, is etymology. And the word curious comes from the Latin word cura, which means to care. There's another translation that means the cure. So perhaps curiosity is the cure. And if we can move through life with this sense of childlike curiosity, I think that we'll evolve as people. I think that we'll evolve as a community, and God willing, we'll evolve as a world. Because ultimately, we're all on this planet together. You know, we talk about sides, there are no sides. We talk about us against them, there is no us against them. That is an illusion. Separation is an illusion. We are in this together for better or for worse, and we get to choose.
Sure. I want to come to Kaylee on that. Kaylee, do you think that we aren't living in an us versus them? Is it an illusion? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, like, I understand completely what Roy is saying. And I think that the media makes it look like it's an us versus them situation, because the ultimate goal is for them to divide us as a society. And so for people like us, I think it's important to actually get the true message across and understand that, like I said, it's good that we have these conversations, because when you sit down and have these conversations, you realize that you align with somebody's views a lot more than you think you would. And social media and the media in general do not help do that. They want us to be divided. They want us to fight against each other. And they want a lot of anger and hostility towards each other. I don't know why. I would love to figure out why, but it's a constant divide and like fighting.
Yeah, here we're not doing that. I want to thank both Kaylee and Roy for coming on to Erupt and having this conversation. Before we go, Kaylee, if people have been watching us and are enthralled by you, want to get to know you, want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Kaylee Campbell. All of my usernames are the same. My TikTok is also the Kaylee Campbell. That's where I post most of the time. I just got unbanned, so that's good.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I have a Twitter, and I post some of my tweets on my Instagram, so you can find my Twitter through there. And then I do have a podcast called What's Your Point, and I post on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all of those platforms.
Thank you. Roy, if people want to get connected to you, if they want to get connected to Success Stories, where can they find you guys?
You can find us on TikTok and Instagram on Prison Feminism or Success Stories. Do you mind if I share a brief story before we end?
Sure, go for it.
So there was this samurai who came across a monk in his journey. And he approaches the monk and he says, I know you monks are renowned for your wisdom. Perhaps you can teach me the difference between heaven and hell. The monk frowns at the samurai and says, I wouldn't waste my time explaining such lofty things to a fool as yourself. I know you samurais are barbaric people. The samurai pulls his sword from his scabbard and says, I should kill you for the words that come from your mouth. And the monk replies calmly, and that, my friend, is hell. Amazed by the insight that the monk helped him to gain, the samurai put his sword back in his scabbard and says, thank you, my friend, for giving me such beautiful wisdom today. And the monk calmly replies, and that, my friend, is heaven. So thank you. I just wanted to share that story with y'all before we departed. I think that we have a lot of room for growth as a society and as individuals. I love y'all. Come check us out. Prison Feminism, Success Stories. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Erupt, everyone involved in making this happen. I'm deeply appreciative of the work y'all do. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you, Roy. Kaylee, Roy, we are so happy to have had you on Erupt. We look forward to bringing you back. We look forward to having more conversations with you. This is the hub for conversations that matter, conversations that you probably aren't seeing anywhere else, as Kaylee was talking about. Everywhere else, they want to divide us. Here at Erupt, we're just trying to bring people together to have conversations. Again, I want to ask everyone to subscribe to our channel. If you're intrigued and you want to read some stuff that we've written, you can message us. You can find us at erupt.news. It's the site for Erupt. My name is ARYA DAVACHI. I want to thank you so much for watching. Come back, stay a while. This is Erupt.